I'm going to end by reading the opening lines of my book written about 10 years ago, Unweaving the Rainbow, lines that I have long earmarked to be read at my funeral. We are going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they're never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the sand grains of Sahara. Certainly those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA so massively outnumbers the set of actual people. In the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, in our ordinariness, that are here. We live on a planet that is all but perfect for our kind of life, not too warm and not too cold, basking in kindly sunshine, softly watered, a gently spinning green and gold harvest festival of a planet. Yes, and alas, there are deserts and slums, there is starvation and racking misery to be found. But take a look at the competition. Compared with most planets, this is paradise, and parts of Earth are still paradise by any standards. What are the odds that a planet picked at random will have these complaisant properties? Even the most optimistic calculation will put it at less than 1 in a million. Imagine a spaceship full of sleeping explorers, deep-frozen would-be colonists of some distant world. Perhaps the ship is on a forlorn mission to save the species before an unstoppable comet, like the one that killed the dinosaurs, hits the home planet. The voyagers go into the deep freeze, soberly reckoning the odds against their spaceships ever chancing upon a planet friendly to life. If 1 in a million planets is suitable at best, and it takes centuries to travel from each star to the next, the spaceship is pathetically unlikely to find a tolerable, let alone safe haven for its sleeping cargo. But imagine that the ship's robot pilot turns out to be unthinkably lucky. After millions of years, the ship does find a planet capable of sustaining life, a planet of equable temperature, bathed in warm starshine, refreshed by oxygen and water. The passengers, Rip Van Winkles, wake stumbling into the light. After 1 million years of sleep, here is a whole new fertile globe, a lush planet of warm pastures, sparkling streams and waterfalls, a world bountiful with creatures darting through alien green felicity. Our travellers walk entranced, stupefied, unable to believe their unaccustomed senses or their luck. The story asks for too much luck. It would never happen. And yet, isn't it what has happened to each one of us? We have woken after hundreds of millions of years of sleep, defying astronomical odds. Admittedly, we didn't arrive by spaceship, we arrived by being born. And we didn't burst conscious into the world, but accumulated awareness gradually through babyhood. The fact that we gradually apprehend our world, rather than suddenly discovering it, should not subtract from its wonder. Of course, I'm playing tricks with the idea of luck, putting the cart before the horse. It is no accident that our kind of life finds itself on a planet whose temperature, rainfall, and everything else are exactly right. If the planet was suitable for another kind of life, it is that other kind of life that would have evolved here. But we, as individuals, are still hugely blessed, privileged, and not just privileged to enjoy our planet. More, we are granted the opportunity to understand why our eyes are open, and why they see what they do in the short time before they close forever. Thank you very much.
I mean, do you have a view on what sort of action one can take? We've heard from some very brave campaigners in some of these countries, but when you look at the scale of it and you look at how entrenched religious establishments are in running countries, reasonably, what are the first steps towards that?
It's a very difficult thing. If you're talking about the Islamic world.
Well, yes, particularly countries, I mean, like Saudi Arabia, which are allies of Britain. I mean, so much of the Middle East. Even if you didn't have the current crisis with ISIS, and I wonder what your view is, someone with a position of such authority in the world of humanism, about how people, some of the people in this room, could think about trying to help bring about change.
I derive some comfort from talking to people in this room who come from this area, who tell me, and I hear it again and again, that the number of people who are dissenting from the predominant religion of that region is much greater than any of us on the whole realize. And that there is an underground movement, there is an undercurrent going on, and it could be one of those cases where there might be a critical mass, where enough of such people come out that it ceases to be dangerous to do
well,
so.
Tell me about coming out, because this is a big part of your campaigning, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's practical in so many of these countries yet, when you look at the level of authoritarian crackdown on any form of dissent.
That's right, and that's why I use the phrase critical mass, because there does come a point when enough people dissent from the ruling majority that the ruling majority no longer exercises the power that it at present does. If everybody believes that they're the only one who is an unbeliever, then they're afraid to mention it. But if there were some way in which they could secretly know that there are lots and lots of other people. I mean, I get this in a small way when I going back to the United States now. When I go on a lecture tour, I tend to concentrate wherever possible on the so-called Bible Belt. I tend to go to the Deep South, and what I find there is that, contrary to what many people expect, I get my most enthusiastic receptions in the Bible Belt. And just a second thought immediately tells you why. The sort of people who come to my lectures and the lectures of people like Christopher Hitchens are beleaguered. They feel threatened by the society in which they live. And so when somebody like me goes there, I will fill a hall with 2,000, 3,000 people. And the point is, for me, is not what I can tell them. The point for me is that they see each other in a great big hall, and they realize, I'm not alone after all. I thought I was. So I see myself as a lightning rod to bring people together and recognize their existence. And I'm hoping that, I mean, of course, in America, they're not actually physically endangering themselves by doing so. But there could be something similar in the Islamic world. Perhaps the internet could be a major force for informing and then empowering people, because it's relatively hard for an authoritarian government to police the internet. I mean, they try, and
they just shut down networks.
To some extent, they succeed. But I think that it's going to get harder and harder to do that, and so it's possible that the internet may be one of our biggest weapons.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the...
Deism is, as you know, the belief that no particular personal God, but just some kind of creative intelligence which set the whole clockwork running, set the universe going, and then retired and did nothing more. So doesn't forgive sins, doesn't listen to prayers, doesn't know what we think, has no interest in human affairs, just started the laws of physics going. That's deism. Theism is belief in some kind of personal God. Such as the Christian God, the Muslim God, the gods of Valhalla, the gods of Olympia, and so on. Pantheism, I've characterized as sexed up atheism. It's kind of what Einstein believed. Einstein did not believe in any kind of personal God, but he had a kind of reverence for that which we don't yet understand. And some pantheists sort of feel there's a kind of, I don't know, it's hard to quite characterize exactly what pantheists believe. Agnostics are people who don't know. That word was coined by Thomas Henry Huxley, Darwin's friend and colleague. Some people confuse agnosticism with thinking there's a kind of 50-50 toss-up whether there's a God or not. And there's really no reason to plump for 50-50. In a sense, we're all agnostic, because we can never actually disprove. We can't disprove leprechauns and pixies. We have to be agnostic about them. But for all practical purposes, we are a leprechaunists and a pixieists and a fairyists.
And in the same way, we can be atheists while technically admitting that we cannot actually disprove the existence of any particular God. I do sometimes call myself an agnostic, but I'm a bit wary of that, because people sometimes think that means a total non-commitment. And I'd rather say that I'm an atheist in the same sense as I'm an tooth fairyist.
The other big thing I have about children, and I've become almost a bore about this, is labelling of children. It's another aspect of the same thing, but indoctrination goes with the tying a label around a child and saying, this is a Catholic child, this is a Protestant child, this is a Muslim child. And what really pisses me off about this is that it isn't only done by the religious. We all do it. It's part of our culture to label a child. We see in the newspapers in Northern Ireland Catholic children on their way to school being stoned by Protestants, or Protestant children on their way to school being stoned. The newspapers, which are not run by religion, it's not religious propaganda, it's simply accepted that there is such a thing as a Catholic child. No, there isn't. There's a child of Catholic parents. Don't ever talk about a Catholic child, a Protestant child, a Muslim child. I do not believe that religion is the root of all evil. Thank you, Channel 4. Religion is the root of quite a lot of evil, but that didn't make for a very catchy title. I just want to briefly reply to Dr. Spivey a couple of points. He says we're fighting a losing battle because religion is a part of our human nature. Well, speak for yourself. It's not a part of mine, and it's not a part of the great majority of my friends in universities in England and the United States and elsewhere. He also said, if we had no religion, how would we do without King's College Chapel, the Sistine Chapel, etc.? Well, you know, artists have to make a living, and in the time when the Sistine Chapel was built and its ceiling was painted, you know who had the money. Artists such as Michelangelo had to go where the patronage was. We shall never know the ceiling that Michelangelo might have painted if he had been commissioned to paint the Museum of Science, for example. We shall never know what Haydn's Evolution oratorio might have sounded like, or Beethoven's Mesozoic Symphony. You suggested that Mormons are, the toss-up is whether, yes. I mean, the Mormon religion is so obviously fake, founded by a transparent charlatan in the 19th century, Joseph Smith. I mean, nothing could be more obvious than that that man was a fake and a charlatan and a liar. And yet now we have a presidential candidate who is prepared to say that he believes in this mountebank, who wrote a bogus book, the Book of Mormon, although he was writing in the 19th century, chose to write it in 17th century English. I mean, why don't people see through that? I just can't understand it. But anyway, that was a digression, right? A quote from Kurt Wise, who is an American geologist. He studied geology at Harvard, no less, under Stephen Jay Gould, no less, and he was set for a good career as an academic geologist, which all his life he had desperately wanted. The problem was, it came from within, it was his religious upbringing, his firewall of faith. And he couldn't reconcile the two, his scientific education with his religion, and he literally got a pair of scissors and went right through the Bible and cut out every verse that would have to go if he accepted his scientific education. And in the end, he decided there was nothing left of his Bible. He therefore tossed out science and said, and from then on, he said, With that in great sorrow, I tossed into the fire all my dreams and hopes in science. And he goes on, I am a young age creationist because that is my understanding of the scripture. As I shared with my professors years ago when I was in college, if all the evidence in the universe turns against creationism, I would be the first to admit it, but I would still be a creationist because that is what the Word of God seems to indicate. Here I must stand. If religion can do that to a highly educated Harvard geologist, just think what it can do to an average school child or student. Thank you.
Been subjected to a kind of word salad of scientific jargon used out of context with inappropriately, apparently uncomprehendingly.
So, Dr. Dawkins, I would like to remind you that ad hominem is a logical fallacy, and that's Science 101. You should know that.
Ad hominem means talking about a person
This is my
as an
turn
individual.
to speak, sir. Okay? You accused me of jargon. You accused me of misusing language. How many people understood what I was saying?
You're lying.
Okay. Basically, the atomic universe is stardust, and stardust has sentience in you and me. According to people like Freeman Dyson, even atoms have sentience.
Atoms have no sentience. Atoms,
You disagree with Freeman Dyson?
yeah,
Then?
if that's what he says, which I doubt, I disagree with him. Atoms do not have sentience. Atoms contribute to making brains. Brains have sentience. Have you seriously just said that a single cell has consciousness?
A single cell has awareness.
What do you mean by that?
That it has the ability to respond to its environment.
Of course it has the ability to respond to its environment. That is not consciousness.
So you said a while ago, atoms get together to create complexity. How do they get together?
By processes which are well understood
By
by
a
biologists.
process which is random or intelligent?
Not intelligence.
Okay.
By the processes of embryology put together by the processes of evolution. You cannot seriously sit there and say that the hard problem of consciousness, and it is a very hard problem, is solved by saying that a single cell has consciousness.
Cognition, perception, imagination, insight, intuition, creativity, choice, freedom, the desire for meaning, purpose, all of that are expressions of awareness as consciousness and influence everything that we experience in life.
You think a single cell has that? And you think a single cell
has a rudimentary form of awareness.
Do you think
And
an
we
atom
ev-
has that?
Sorry?
Do you think an atom has that?
According to Freeman Dyson, yes.
Freeman Dyson says an atom has awareness.
Yes, sir. Check it out.
Señoras y señores, un aplauso para...
If Freeman Dyson ever said atoms are aware, then he's wrong. I don't think he said it. I think he should sue you.
Wow.
Depths of understanding that we have yet to fathom, yet to plumb, in order to understand what's going on inside the human brain.
Who's we?
Boggles my
Who's
mind.
we? Who's we?
The scientific community.
The scientific community. Driven